Just firstly, extending our condolences to the Minister of Housing. The first question that I have is around state housing and kāinga ora, starting with asset maintenance for kāinga ora. I understand that the government has planned to cut $1 billion for kāinga ora towards asset and maintenance and staffing over the next 4 years, which makes me ask the question, what impacts will those cuts have for the people living in kāinga ora housing, acknowledging that in Sir Bill English's review, he noted that over the next 2 decades, significant investment will be needed in maintenance and renewals of state housing? And in terms of those staffing cuts at kāinga ora, what impact will that have on tenants who rely on KO support staff? And I just wanted to, for context around those questions, bring attention to the Minister that respiratory illnesses are now the 3rd leading cause of death in Aotearoa, and researchers have attributed some of that to poor quality housing. And we know that a lot of our state housing does not meet healthy home standards. So how are we supposed to get our state housing stock up to standard and make sure that it's healthy when there's been over $1 billion worth of cuts? My next questions in regards to kāinga ora is around the 300 public housing projects, large-scale projects that have been paused indefinitely. And my question is, when will we know the status of those projects and when they will continue? An example of a major large-scale project in my electorate, Wellington Central, is the Arlington Apartments, which has had $48 million put into it and was going to fund 350 new homes in a city where there are over 3,000 people waiting for homes. I'm not sure where they're going to go, and we are relying on that project to be built. So can the Minister offer any assurances that those 300 projects will remain and whether they will be built, given the need is definitely there? My next lot of questions are around emergency housing and the changes to eligibility that the Minister has led, the Associate Minister has led. And obviously those changes in emergency housing are saving $350 million, but the downstream impacts of people not being able to access emergency housing means that more people will be homeless, as the Minister was advised by MSD officials. So my question is, are those cost savings worth increasing homelessness? And what is the point of reducing access to emergency housing numbers by putting people on the streets? And I just have one other question that was brought up when Q&A looked into emergency housing over the weekend. 20% of those people in emergency housing who have left emergency housing are unaccounted for. We don't know where they've gone. Does the Minister have any more information about where they've gone? And what proportion of the people who have left emergency housing have simply been moved into boarding houses? That is a question that I have around emergency housing. The next point that I want to raise is around homelessness. I want to understand whether the government, since they have cancelled the Homelessness Action Plan, how they are going to account for the massive levels of homelessness that will happen due to all of the cumulative decisions that the government has made around bringing back no-cause evictions and tightening the eligibility for emergency housing and the lack of public housing supply increase. Will the government commit to renewing a homelessness action plan, or at least having a plan towards addressing the consequences of their decisions? And finally, does the government have any data around women experiencing homelessness? Yeah, there is no publicly available gender data on homelessness, who is experiencing and how they're experiencing it. So I want to understand whether the Minister will...
has expired.
Who recently passed away. There's a number of take or kaupapa that have been raised, and let me just go through them one by one, but opening with the statement that we are absolutely committed to making sure we have a sustainable and enduring state housing sector or state housing provision. We are really focused on getting a number of things back on track, and certainly state housing sits within and across a whole housing ecology or ecosystem where everything needs to work together and in sync. And what we found is that the ecology of the ecosystem of housing when we arrived was not necessarily working in sync. So yes, there have been some tough choices made about savings across housing in urban development, particularly around kāinga ora, but also across other aspects of the system. For example, mention of the emergency housing savings over the next 5 years. Certainly some of the initial consideration to asset management and savings that would be made through better asset management over time and asset maintenance were made. Some of those conclusions were drawn well before we arrived in office, and there was an ongoing program within kāinga ora to consider how they could better manage and maintain the asset. So some of those musings and directions were actually forming well before we turned up. In terms of healthy home standard, yes, we are committed to that, and over 99% compliance in the kāinga ora portfolio. There are a number of projects that have been put on pause or on hold, and we consider those, especially given the fiscal responsibility that we undertake as the coalition government. In terms of Arlington, again, it's sort of in that category. We're considering all options. Nothing, I understand, has been decided as yet on the Arlington, but we're considering that project, and that will come up along with a number of other matters in the next few months. You know, what we are really focused on is making sure more houses, more new builds and new housing is built, not only for those that need some government tautoko, actually, but for all New Zealanders. And some of that provision, actually most of that provision, will come through private development rather than state housing development. We're trying to trying to make sure that the conditions are in place where we can encourage that. Just in terms of net housing, I'll just get through the IRS and Kāinga Ora questions and then I'll come back to emergency housing. Over the next couple of years, we are foreshadowing over 5,400, nearly 5,500 state homes will be built. However, there will be a net build of just over 2,500, 2,650 net homes will be built. In terms of the IRS places, as people will know, we were envisaging 1,500 new IRS places to be contracted specifically with community housing providers over the next couple of years. 500 to get going quickly to maintain some sort of momentum and 1,000 through a bit more strategic partnerships in specific areas where the needs are high. In terms of the Kāinga Ora review, again, we're very clear about the conclusions that were drawn out of that review, and what a great review it was, might I add, which identified some unsustainability in the funding and financing of Kāinga Ora, and also a need to drive more transparency and credibility around state housing delivering on the needs of New Zealanders who need state housing. So those were ultimately the two key findings, and there were some recommendations that came out of that, and you've seen a refreshed Kāinga Ora board as a result. Can I turn to emergency housing, because that's quite a topical matter, and I think we can all attest that emergency housing over the last few years has been a financial, moral, fiscal and cultural catastrophe. And at the peak, of course, over 5,000 households in emergency, and when we arrived it was about 3,342. But our goal in emergency housing is to reduce that number of households by 75% to about 800 households by 2030, and we are getting back on track and reaching that goal. We are focused on making sure that emergency housing can support those with a genuine need for short-term stay and temporary accommodation. And the data shows that we now know where 80% of people exiting emergency housing go to. When we arrived, we knew where 50% were going to. Now we know where 80% are going to, but can I say that people exiting emergency housing do not have to tell us where they are going, but we are 30% better knowing 30% more on where they're going. Kia ora. Anina Williams.
Whew. And I'd say, before I go on there, good questions, Tamatha. You got it right on this occasion.
And can I answer that? Because the issue had to be about the $2.9 billion that the previous government under Labour spent, promising to build 100,000 Kāinga Ora homes, and end up only building like less than 1,000.
So it was 10,000 builds.
Well,
not
maybe
100,000, 10,000.
But look, mate, it was very much less than. And 2.9 billion is like, where did the money go to? I mean, they should have an audit. Like, I mean, we don't want to assume wrongly, but has it gone somewhere? You know, for someone's election chances? But it's very concerning. That's a huge sum. That's like maybe. Well, I mean, you know, it's like, can be 200,000 houses. And where did that money go to? Consultants to discuss where or how to build the houses, to make it green? Or
I mean, I do know that there's been some new Kāinga Ora houses have been built in Newtown here. And many of them would fall into eco-home territories, which are designed to have low energy usage. So that the tenants in there aren't having to say, you know, you might have an income-related rent house, but you might have a house that has a skyrocketing power bill in order to keep it warm. And that was designed that the healthy homes, so that the tenants that are in there don't end up in places like the hospital, so that all the new builds are up at a very high standard. And I do know that the local Kāinga Ora, Newtown Residents Association, which I better let everyone actually know that I'm the new treasurer of the Newtown Residents Association. So that is something that has happened. We do have a contact through Kāinga Ora, and which is Josh Clark. And he does, fill us in with the different things of the different projects of what's going there. But we've also heard Arlington's been a big thing that the Newtown Residents Association has been trying to push for to happen, because which has now been put on hold. And see, that was one that was meant to, provide a lot of, I think Tamatha said there 350 houses, and some of them were also meant to be supported living situations for problematic people, so that they have an on-site manager who can sit down there and deal with things, so you can get things before the problems escalate to the point where the police turn up or something like that. Or they just need someone who can probably just keep an eye on them, say hello. If they're distressed, they talk, they keep them in a more functionable state than being in a crisis situation. Mm-hmm. So that was Arlington. That was one of the things there. The Rolleston Street flats in Mount Cook, which are in Tamatha's electric, because that's on the other side of the boundary, but does have that supported living part in there, where they do have on-site managers to help keep those difficult people, high needs, who are drug addiction, alcohol, to keep them at their next step of remaining being clean after the rehab aspect.
That's good to hear. So great to hear you're a treasurer. And what you say, it could be helpful because I had this experience myself coming back to New Zealand in MIQ, right? And, you were literally having to stay wherever you had to stay. And I was trying to be like starting a residents association in this apartments in Auckland Central, Empire Apartments. Used to be for uni students, but none came because of COVID. And it was becoming like what you said, like people were smoking cannabis and selling drugs below, and there were kids running around, and and it was not safe for kids. So I said, let's have a residents committee. And as I went to the counter, and then I said that, and I think they must have heard me. And they sent one guy who followed me up to my 15th floor with like a gold chain, like a typical, I don't know, drug gangster guy. And he told me, "Hey, mate, I just came out from jail." I said, "Yes, so what?" And you know what I was in jail for? I killed a police officer. I said, "Well, are you trying to threaten me?" I used to be a drug rehab officer, which I was in Singapore. So, and this was the kind of condition that you have working people, professional people, like, me, I'm an academic, living with. And so your residential thing is great because you kind of talk to them and, this was the kind of situation. So I think that there is room for that, to have that kind of more security measures. So don't you see that the current government's anti-gang task force is good in that it does clamp down on crime? I mean, recent reports have shown that crime has gone down by 22%. I mean, that's great. I mean,
that's in Auckland CBD, but in our areas around Auckland CBD, it's actually gone up. So you've just pushed the problem outside the CBD ring.
Right, but if it's inside CBD, wouldn't that be dangerous for the tourists and people like us who go around and wanting to enjoy the city of sales and apart from
I would have called it in more recent times the city of house sales, but yes. I mean, for Frosty who's out there, no, we don't have a YouTube partnership program yet. We've only got 191 subscribers. We need 500 subscribers and 3,000 hours. The hours, on the other hand, look like they're going to get there soon. The subscribers are our difficult part there, Frosty. But you can always put it into our Kiwi bank account, which I've given you our bank account number there, which I'll just put up on the screen. Late fee. It's like, there's our bank account number for the late fee.
Kainga Aura, right? Tamatha Paul was talking about action plan. Again, is the habit of the left. Sorry for saying this, forgive me. Always having plans and strategies, ideas, but never getting it done, like fixing the
I mean, that's a thing.
Nothing was done until Simeon Brown said, let's fix it.
Yeah, I mean, COVID was a problem.
Well, I worked 4 years as an insurance broker, driving like 1,000 kilometers from Hamilton, right, to Kaitaia, to Keri. Heaps of potholes. I mean, if you hit one and you make a mistake, that's the end of you. If a truck hits you from behind, or if a truck hits a pothole. So, I mean, the point is like, I think, one may be sincere, but one may be sincerely wrong. And the way to hell is paved with good intentions. And Labour has all these, decision-making committees, caviar and cheese and wine and cheese and discussions, and every consultant get paid $500,000 for. Should we have a cycleway here? But it's all great. It's all clean.
What's cheese and wine got to do with housing? I like cheese and wine, but what's that got to do with housing development?
I mean, that's the whole thing. You waste so much time talking about it, but not getting it done. And
maybe we need to get Jonathan Hunt to sit there and be in there, since he used to be nicknamed the Minister of Cheese and Wine.
And then the right guy comes in and get it back on track. I mean, PM Luxon is getting it back on track. And
while removing the train tracks.
He's getting it back on track by making cuts. I mean,
removing the train tracks and leaving the wheels run on the sleepers.
Well, I mean, Louis Upton was saying actually that 95% of those on MSD help, but are all on the green light. That means it's just the 5% for whatever reasons. And one of them was like, you see, from 18 years old to 45, that's the peak of your life. They could have opted to study and get student allowance. They could have opted to do a certificate for building, plumbing, but they were straight on to the government help and then just didn't do anything about it.
Well, you've been beyond student allowance. You're still technically on government help.
Exactly, but at least you are building up your education. So there were so many avenues that our previous governments, Labour too, credit to them, where credit is due, and national that allows them this hope.
Yeah.
It's a real shame. It's a real shame that National cut fees-free first-year tuition, because that
which actually
would have been nice to get people through the door to study building and plumbing.
Yeah, and there are many certificates that you could do, but people just don't do any. They don't even look for, work. I mean, if you're 18, I mean, if you gave me a chance to be on student allowance, I mean, I had to pay my way and study in Australia. I had to work 4 days a week as an overseas student. But I mean, you guys have a great thing, man. You can even just, which uni should I do? Which studies should I, like that. And they didn't want to study, and they are on the government help for 30 years.
Yeah. Now, Laura, did you look up anything on what the government?
Lose a job or something.
He's still going.
I mean, you need to stop filibustering, Eric.
I mean, like there are many courses, right? I mean, like, look, there is that. I'm just using a few, like plumbing. I mean, there are heaps of courses that you could go to at your age, which you all have done, so obviously, and you have all your educational backgrounds. But here we are. I mean, we are talking about those who, not that they couldn't or didn't have the opportunity, but didn't want to. I mean, we don't assume that they belong to gangs and then whatever, but what do you think of that? I mean, do you think that they could have just chose to upgrade themselves? Or?
Well, we haven't quite got onto social development yet. That one was housing. Okay, when we get to social development, that would be a great place to put it. Now, we've got